Welcome, everybody, to this web event from the American Enterprise Institute, where we'll be discussing college trustee leadership in a new era. I am Preston Cooper, a senior fellow in higher education policy here at the American Enterprise Institute. So yesterday, AEI's Conservative Education Reform Network and the Heritage Foundation released a new edited volume entitled Fulfilling the Trust: College Trustee Leadership in a New Era. This edited volume was conceived as a response to the increasingly important role that college trustees are playing in university leadership. In recent years, Republican governors have recognized that their public colleges are financially mismanaged, academically corrupt, and ideologically captured, and they're asking their appointees to do something about it. In this new edited volume, we've brought together a group of eminent higher education scholars to provide a blueprint for trustees to effectively govern their institutions. Lindsay Burke, Nikki Neely, and David Randall have kindly agreed to sit down with me and introduce this edited volume, explore those challenges at American universities, and discuss the role of college trustees in shaping and reforming them. So a quick run of show before we dive in. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists. We will have a panel discussion for about 40 minutes, and then we'll turn to audience questions. If you want to submit a question for the panelists to answer, you can do that two ways. You can submit that to anna.low@aei.org. That's ANNA.LOW@AEI.org. Or you can submit them on X with hashtag #CollegeTrusteesAEI. So let me turn now to our eminent panelists. So Lindsay Burke is a co-editor of the Fulfilling the Trust volume, and she is the director of the Center for Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation. She's also a trustee at George Mason University, where she earned her PhD in education policy. Lindsay, welcome. Nicole Neely is the president and founder of Parents Defending Education, now Defending Education, which is a K-12 advocacy organization that is now entering the higher education space. She serves as a trustee at the University of Mary Washington in Virginia, and she holds a master's in public policy from Pepperdine University. Nikki, welcome. David Randall is the Director of Research at the National Association of Scholars, and he authored a chapter for Fulfilling the Trust about raising academic rigor. His advocacy and research focuses on history, civics, and liberal arts education, and he has a PhD in history from Rutgers University. David, glad to have you here. So, Lindsay, I want to start with you. You are a trustee at George Mason University. You also helped edit this volume. Actually, I would say you did the lion's share of the work in editing this volume about how college trustees can better serve their institutions and better reform higher education. So I want to ask you, just to kick us off here, what do you see as the role of a trustee, and what advice would you give to trustees who want to serve more effectively?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question, Preston, and thanks for hosting this. It's a real pleasure and honor to be able to collaborate with AEI and to be able to put out a joint AEI heritage publication on something that's so important and I think is often overlooked both by just the general public in terms of its efficacy in shaping higher ed, but also governors and the ability that they have to really put their stamp on higher education in their state through their board. So it really is an important role for people to engage in and think about. But, you know, as we were thinking about this and we opened our edited volume talking about God and Man at Yale that William F. Buckley wrote, but he had lamented in that his alma mater was really shirking its responsibility to transmit the cultural and moral heritage of the U.S. and was instead just embracing moral relativism and, as he said, economic collectivism. And so it was in that tract that he had called on Yale to called on their trustees to really exert more administrative control and more intellectual direction over their institution. But we know that they ultimately did not do that. And we know what has happened to higher education writ large today. And so universities, if you have a TV in your home and ever turn it on, you know that universities have more than just a bad PR problem right now. There is lack of intellectual rigor, there's lack of viewpoint diversity, anti-Semitism is an issue on college campuses, there's the failure to prepare students for careers. Many, as you note in your research, Preston, degrees have a negative ROI. So higher education has really lost its way. And that was what motivated us to pull together this edited volume. What can trustees do about it? So it's an excellent collection of essays I'm biased because Jay Green on my team wrote a chapter, but his chapter is excellent, and he talks about how academia has really slowly over time become a racket. Where professors don't work very hard and they focus too much on unproductive and low quality research. And then the general public is at the same time increasingly becoming aware of the racket that's in place and are really losing confidence in universities. And that's threatening universities' access to public subsidies, this PR problem. And so I would add that to the list of grievances with higher education today, what Jay points out. So I think the question for us today on this panel is what is the role of the university board member or trustee? Because it's an incredibly important role. Michael Polikoff and Armand Alakbay, and Armand, full disclosure, is also on the board of George Mason University with me in Virginia, but they've got a great chapter. And they talk about how important this role has historically been, right? That not only did Thomas Jefferson found the University of Virginia, something, of course, that he mentioned on his tombstone above being president, right? That's not even on his tombstone. It was Declaration of Independence and founding UVA. But he also served on the board of visitors of William and Mary and James Madison and Patrick Henry. They were founding trustees of Hampton-Sydney College. Benjamin Rush was a trustee of Dickinson College. Benjamin Franklin was a trustee at the academy that ultimately became UPenn. So for our founding fathers, they saw the role of trustees as incredibly important at the time. But in recent decades, that position of the trustee has largely become an honorific. It is handed out to people who are successful in their community, maybe prominent political leaders, and not a whole lot has been asked of or expected of trustees in the past few decades, except maybe, attend a football game and enjoy some box seats. But this really is beginning to change and has changed pretty significantly over the past couple of years. So today, what we really want to think through is what is appropriate for a board member to engage in. I recently attended and Nikki probably did too, but a board training for board members in the Virginia higher education system. And I thought the facilitator made an important observation. He said that universities grow in the direction of the questions that Board of Visitors members ask. And I thought that was a good way to think about it. And your core fiduciary duties you should think about them around that broader question. So your core fiduciary responsibilities, they do include this duty of care and loyalty and obedience, right? So what does that look like? Your duty of care. You need to attend all the board meetings, read all of your board materials, and there are many, like usually hundreds of pages per board meeting. You've got to be aware of the fiscal and legal and operational health of the university. You have to make good informed decisions that foster good governance. So that's your duty of care. But you also have this duty of loyalty. And what that really means is that you're putting the interests of the college or university above your personal interest, which could include any conflicts of interest that you need to disclose. But that duty of loyalty does not mean that you check your brains or your professional expertise at the door. It really means ensuring the best interests of the university are prioritized. And then when it comes to your duty of obedience, it really means working to align university operations with the university's founding mission and making sure that as a board member, you're operating in accordance with the law and the organization's bylaws and policies. So you've got this duty of care, loyalty, and obedience, but the other big question is to whom? And again, to refer to the really great chapter that Michael Polikoff and Armand Alakbay wrote, they note that the North Star for effective trusteeship is understanding whom the governing board serves. And the answer to that question can only be the public. And that's a really important point that they make. And so in Virginia, for example, our duty is to the Commonwealth of Virginia, not necessarily the university, it is to the Commonwealth first and foremost. So I'll wrap up here just by noting that your role as a board member is to provide strategic leadership. And a big component of that is asking good questions, oversight questions, but also insight questions. So you can ask oversight questions like, did we get a clean audit? Yes or no. But then, ask insight questions. What did we learn from this audit? So asking the deeper questions that can help direct the strategic direction of the university. And then really understanding how things are done. That's a major component of your job. How and who sets the board agenda? How is committee work done? Who are your allies on the board? How do you obtain accurate and timely financial information? So all of these, this is sort of in the nitty gritty of what it means to, I think, serve as an effective board member. But America's future really does depend on the character of higher education, and it is the role of and the duty of trustees and members of boards to shape and improve that character.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. It's great what you said that, in the past, the trustee position was kind of a public honorific, but now a lot of governors are waking up that no, appointments of trustees can be a real lever for change. And Lord knows higher education needs change. And so I want to turn now to Nikki. So, Nikki, you started Parents Defending Education as a watchdog group for K-12 education. You helped expose a lot of the kind of abuses and shine some light on what was going on in our K-12 system. And now you're moving into higher education. You have the rebrand of Parents Defending Education as Defending Education. So tell us a bit about this new mission for your group, and if for trustees who might be listening who want to get involved, who like what you're doing, what can they learn?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when we launched then PDE at the time in 2021, several of my coworkers at the time had sons in high school, and they grew up. And as we all know, when your child goes to college, you don't stop caring about them or loving them. And obviously, the problems in college today are also as acute, if not worse, than in K to 12. But then your child's far away, and you kind of have less control. And so we just wanted to demystify that process for the parents who we have kind of grown up alongside. There is so much jargon, even that, you and I that we have to deal with on a regular basis. What is tenure? What is a faculty senate? I mean, we watch these power grabs from these different entities in the academy. And so how is a person who is just an average, human supposed to think about this? This is the most expensive thing that a family will spend money on, usually aside from a house. And they really should know what they're getting themselves into. I mean, we have watched this slow, steady decline. I mean, over the past since October 7th, certainly, in our living rooms on TV. But we see now with Harvard offering remedial math. I mean, those are things that students obviously should have learned in K to 12 and didn't. And now we're paying, I think, like I ran the numbers, it's about $12,000 to take a full math class as a 25% of your course load for a full year at Harvard. I mean, it's crazy that that kind of thing is happening. And so we wanted to teach people how to engage. That was also, however, one of the reasons that we changed the name from Parents Defending Education to Defending Education, because I didn't want to imply that we want parents like helicopter moms to show up in classrooms or to be micromanaging some TA syllabus. It's not that, but we do think, people should go into this eyes wide open. I think years ago when I was at a Mount Pelerin meeting watching Jonathan Haidt talk about a coming split in academia, where there was going to be Pursuit of Truth University and Social Justice University. And where I think we have had a lot of conflict over the past decade is, unfortunately, you spend your money, you send your child to an institution assuming that it is Pursuit of Truth University because that's how they're billing themselves online. And absolutely, that is not what you're getting. I mean, at this point, if you were to send your child to Oberlin, you know what you're getting into, right? But 15 years ago, it was much more murky at the time. And so I think the more information that's out there, the better. So we are bringing a lot of the tactics that we had used or have been using in K to 12, public records requests, civil rights complaints, research reports, just to compile that information to put it out there. Certainly, the higher ed landscape is a lot more developed than the K to 12 one is. I mean, 4 years ago, these parent groups did not exist. They kind of didn't know what they didn't know. Higher ed has been a problem, I mean, going back to God and Man at Yale. And so there are great groups out there like FIRE and Alliance Defending Freedom and Young Americans for Liberty and groups like that. So there are people out there, but it's, I think, just a matter of this, and everybody knows it's a problem. So it's kind of just a matter of pulling the pieces together. And to the extent where trustees kind of need this guidance as well, I think that's a really essential part of this. I know somebody in the book made the analogy that I have been told several times, which is that we're treated as mushrooms. They keep you in the dark and they feed you manure, and they weaponize your ignorance. And I mean, I look at people like myself or Lindsay or Armand who do this professionally, and there is still so much that I don't know. I mean, I know civil rights law very well, and I certainly terrorize my poor general counsel on a regular basis about that. But I don't know university budgeting. I don't know core curriculum. I am currently dealing with a faculty handbook issue. But these are not things that I was equipped for. And even when you see the different onboarding that the states offer, it was, I mean, ours was basically 36 hours of balance your budget, Godspeed. That's not good enough. It's really, you know, it's a really serious charge. And as Lindsay alluded to, I mean, I went into this knowing, you know what, I send too many Christmas cards as is. I'm not here to make friends. And that's fine. I consider my role to serve the Commonwealth. But I had missed like our sort of onboarding where they really kind of tried to lean on people to, you know, you're here to rubber stamp, you're not supposed to ask a lot of questions, public meeting, right? We want everybody to look good. As you guys know, that is not my way. And so I went in guns blazing and started asking lots of questions about their speech policy and their Title IX compliance and Students for Fair Admissions. And everybody was like kind of taken aback. But it's been funny because over the past couple years, you know, people then will pull me aside in the hallway and say, like, thank you for asking that question. Thank you for raising that point. And so I do think there's a lot of appetite. People want to govern, but they don't know how to. And that's why I'm so grateful for this book. I mean, as I was reading, I was like, oh my gosh, my to-do list is so long. And I thought I was doing a good job before. And so I think there's so much room for improvement because looking what's happening in Washington, I mean, there is the reduction in force that's happening across the federal workforce. Eventually things will be offloaded to the states. But enforcement of all of these things should not always be on the federal government. We should want our institutions to govern themselves properly. We should want the states to take a more active role. And we should certainly, you know, the federal government should be the outlet of last resort, but they should not be the one driving the boat on all of these issues. Certainly, you know, they have been very asleep at the wheel on a lot of the civil rights enforcement over the past couple, you know, decade or so. But I think that this is very incumbent on the institutions themselves to police their own houses.
Thanks very much, Nikki. So you mentioned something that I think shocked a lot of people, which was that Harvard, you know, is now offering remedial math for a lot of students now. And I think somebody who was probably shocked but not surprised by that news is our fourth panelist, David Randall here. So David, your chapter focused on one of the central problems in universities these days, which is a lack of academic rigor. Too many students come in unprepared to do college level work, and universities have been only too happy to lower standards for them. So why do you see this as the big problem here, and what do you think trustees can do to address it at their institutions?
Well, it's a big problem because it's lack of stewardship for the basic mission of a university. Taxpayer dollars are being directed to universities to provide a real undergraduate education. It's the duty of a trustee to defend taxpayer dollars and make sure they actually produce a rigorous undergraduate education, which will truly prepare graduates, for career and for being citizens of the republic. So it's basic mission and stewardship, and what is to be done. Boards of trustees, I think, need to focus on what is practical and what is simple such that they can get accountability. And I guess there are two things, admission standards and course quality that I would say are worth emphasizing. For admission standards, you want to have increasingly rigorous admission standards applied equally to all applicants to make sure that they're ready for a proper undergraduate education. And you need to be aware that getting from point A to point B is difficult. You want to make sure that as you're raising standards, there's still a place somewhere in your state university system for the vast majority of applicants, including people who are prepared for the old standards. So raise your standards carefully. Focus first on, say, a flagship university, move from there to the other senior colleges in a system, then the community colleges, and make sure that what you're doing when you raise standards is within the reach at each stage of the K-12 schools. You're trying to give the K-12 schools an incentive, but you've got to go from A to B and B to C and C to D, not suddenly raise the bar beyond the capacity of your K-12 school. So make for long-term steady improvement in admission standards, which is practical both for you and for the K-12 schools that are your feeders. The other thing you want to do is, of course, to improve the quality of the courses. And here I would say that to be practical, what you want to focus above all is the general education requirements. There are relatively few courses. They're roughly a third of the credits. They are the introductory courses. It's possible for a board of trustee to engage in oversight over general education requirements the way it's just not practical to oversee every single course. The recommendations in the chapter, and I should say of the National Association of Scholars and the Civics Alliance, is to reduce the number of general education requirements, ideally to a core curriculum, but if not that, then say for your humanities course, no more than 5 or 6 options. For your social studies courses, no more than 5 or 6 options. You get good benefits by making sure that every student graduates with a common education. That's good in and of itself, but it's also an administrative reform that makes it possible for boards of trustees to be able to say, yes, I can oversee all of this and get accountability. I can do this for 65 courses the way I cannot for 1,000 courses. And I will just add, get rid of remedial courses. You can say that there's remedial courses which are available in some non-college institute, maybe even physically located in a college. But once you say that you can take a remedial course for college credit, that's simply overwhelming pressure to lower standards. So you really have to look closely, get rid of the remedial math at Harvard, as you mentioned, and make sure that introductory courses aren't becoming practically remedial courses without officially giving you notice.
Thanks very much, David. Yeah, in my own research, I've looked at this issue too, where we see, your academic record in high school is a very strong predictor of how you're going to perform in college. And if you've got an A average in high school, and you enroll in college, your likelihood of graduating with a bachelor's degree is about 90%. If you've got a C average, your likelihood of graduating is about 13%. So, at a certain point, we just have to say we have to have some standards for admission because, not everybody who wants to apply for the college pipeline is going to be able to do the work. Lindsay, I want to go back to you really quick. So there's a lot of competing interest groups on campus, and this may help explain why so many universities are such a mess. So in his chapter, which you mentioned, Michael Poliakoff writes, the essence of great trusteeship is to listen to all constituencies, but be beholden to none. So how do you navigate these different interest groups on campus, avoid what so many trustees have experienced, which is basically getting rolled by, the various interest groups on campus and their agendas? How do you cut through all of that and make the change that needs to be made?
Yeah, and I think the way Michael sums it up is exactly right. But I think first and foremost, keeping it in mind, front of mind, that your duty is to, in the case of us in Virginia, to the Commonwealth, and thinking about how the overall goals align with the founding mission of the university. I'm at a university that's a very new university, relatively speaking, mid-20th century university. And so thinking about how its founding mission, as new as it is, might align with the goals of the Commonwealth. But in doing that, if you have these overarching goals in place, and this should be strategic direction, right? Again, as a board member, you're not engaging in every little issue that comes up. We're talking about what does good governance look like with the strategic direction of the university overall. But knowing where you want to go, asking the right questions, and then really pointing the university in that direction. So one example of this would be right now, we are grappling, as so many universities are grappling right now, with what does it mean to fulfill the federal government's executive order requirements around DEI. And we also have state level in Virginia changes around DEI. And so knowing what the North Star looks like, making sure that we are admitting people based on merit, that promotion and tenure decisions are based on merit, that we are doing what needs to be done to align with where the law is and make sure that we are doing our fiduciary responsibility to not jeopardize federal funding. But then to your question, making sure that we are listening to the voices of the various stakeholder groups. Nikki mentioned the faculty senate earlier. Making sure that we're listening to students, be them undergrad or graduate students. What are we hearing from the administration? So making sure that we are taking all of those opinions into account and hearing their feedback on maybe the particular nuances of a way that we might approach it in a way that makes the most sense for the university that we're at, but not losing sight of the ultimate goal that we're trying to achieve, which is reorienting whichever university toward things like merit-based admissions. And so I think it's keeping the big goal in mind, but making sure that you are sort of strategically incorporating feedback from the various stakeholder groups to make sure that your approach is the right fit for the university on whose board you serve.
I think that's a great way to sum it up, Lindsay. Thank you very much. One of the key roles for a trustee, as which you alluded to, is asking the right questions, requesting information from your university, which may not be public, that you might need to make better decisions. But college leaders don't always want to be forthcoming with their trustees about this information. So I want to turn to Nikki now for this question. So Nikki, you and I testified together at a hearing several weeks ago, and one congressman on the left basically asked you, well, aren't schools a lot more transparent today than they were, 30 years ago? And you said, well, absolutely not. My organization has filed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of records requests in order to get information out of schools. So you have a lot of experience in this area. And now you're kind of bringing that experience of figuring out how to ask the right questions, request the right information to higher education. So what advice do you have for trustees who want to ask the right questions to get information out of their schools, which the schools may not want to provide, but needs to come to light anyways?
No, it's a really important point. I mean, we look at earlier this year, Dr. Stanley Goldfarb, who was a member of the board of the medical school at VCU, had the temerity to ask questions about the school's DEI program and was forced out. This has happened in 2016, I think, at the University of Texas. Wallace Hall started to raise questions about the admissions process because there was a nepotism whole backdoor issue that ended up being the reason that the then president Bill Powers had to step down. He was not only not given answers, the state legislature, which was Republican, tried to impeach him. And so when boards have asked uncomfortable questions, members have faced blowback. We have seen a number of board members step down over the past year or so. Bert Ellis also was forced out of UVA for being uncollegial, which is very vague, but also seems like made some people feel uncomfortable. And so, and then even we have watched the Virginia state legislature try and block other members who they knew would ask hard questions from getting on. And so there is a real allergy in some cases to oversight. But again, this is your role. You are not there to be friends with the president. You are not there to be buddies with the provost. And I think that is one of the things that's a real sea change. I mean, you look at a lot of these institutions, 10 or 20 years ago, it was like, you got football tickets. Like that was it, bud. And again, that's not what we're here for. I am here to make sure that my organization, fulfills the will of the governor and is fiduciarily responsible and is not, engaging in foolhardy fights with this, the presidential administration. So I think we always tell people to ask, and I'm so glad that this book really starts to give ideas of the questions to ask. What are the things to ask for? Because when you get your beautifully curated package 72 hours before your board meeting, everything looks amazing. I mean, I think, same thing when you're an alumni, right? You always get the solicitation every year. Everything is wonderful. Everything's perfect. Having been someone who has sued my alma mater, right? It's not always perfect, but that's not what the alumni magazine tells you. And so this is very much, your job is to scratch below the surface. And I think that's why, one thing that I think my Mary Washington board has done very well is different people have different specializations. I am the civil rights person. There's someone on our board who is kind of like a real estate person. And so we all know different things that we can dig into that are sort of our areas of expertise. But if or when you do not get the responses you need, I do encourage people. I mean, my group is always, I love to file FOIAs. I actually had FOIA'd a bunch of universities last year over anti-Semitism in my personal capacity. And then also ended up suing a bunch of them. So I think I'm in the process of settling a lawsuit against Rutgers, and I had settled one against Berkeley just for some documents. But there are always outside groups like Defending Education that will ask those questions because public records requests are governed by state law. And so even if they don't want to give you as your board, as a board member, information, they are statutorily obligated to turn over other things to outside parties. Some things that they will not turn over to you as a public records request are deliberative documents, which is like something they hide behind a real lot, honestly. Attorney-client privilege. But that being said, if they will not give you the documents, and I always encourage people to make those requests in writing, because as public university board members, everything we do is FOIA-able. And so, I mean, when Mary Washington had an encampment, I emailed my president every day. What's the plan? Are there outside agitators? There is a paper trail. And I think it's important to start to encourage board members to create those paper trails. Because then, at some point, maybe we'll have a governor or secretary of education who really wants to, step into these things, or an AG. They will see who was intransigent, who were those state bureaucrats and those public university officials who refused to answer questions. That is useful in and of itself as well. And then also, when you're in those meetings, these are open meetings, right? I mean, they have to ask you, they have to answer questions. If they decline to do so, you can ask in closed session, but you should be on the record that you are trying to exercise your responsibility and you are being stopped from doing so. That is a scandal. That is embarrassing. And at the end of the day, these are responsible not only to the state, but also to the federal government. And this is something that those people should be held accountable for. I have no compunction about that.
Thanks very much, Nikki. Really appreciate that answer. So we're going to turn to audience questions in just a minute. I want to give one more question to David, but just as a reminder, you can submit your questions on X at #CollegeTrusteesAEI, or you can submit them via email to anna.low, that's LOW, at aei.org. So David, I want to turn to you again. You note in your chapter that accreditors depend on member institutions' consent to impose new rules on their member colleges. This was kind of a channel for change that I had not really thought about before. But of course, accreditors are membership-based organizations, and ultimately, they depend on the consent of their members. So this kind of implies that trustees have some capacity to fight back when accreditors overreach. Could you tell us a little bit more about this idea?
Yes, and I'm going to start with an example because each accrediting organization is different. The Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on College, SACSCOC, they have a college delegate assembly with one voting representative from each member institution. Its responsibilities include electing the SACSCOC Board of Trustees and approving all revisions in accrediting standards recommended by the SACSCOC board. That means that if you give instructions to the university president, to its delegates, you can withhold consent for a DEI policy, withhold consent for voting for somebody who's in favor of DEI policies. The crucial thing is that university administrations often try to say, oh, it's not us, it's the accreditors who are responsible. We don't have any responsibility for this. And frequently they do, and they are not making it apparent that you can, in point of fact, influence what precisely the boards of trustees, what the accreditors do. Now, each accrediting organization is different. What I just said was SACSCOC in the southern states. You need to look up in each case what precisely is the relationship of your university to the accrediting organization. And that means the regional accreditors, the disciplinary accreditors, the professional accreditors, and don't just accept that you have to do what they say. Look to see what your powers are and give instructions. And I must say, this will also help university officials who might be sympathetic but are sort of subject to peer pressure. And if you give them a clear instruction, then they can say, oh gosh, I'm sorry, we just have to do this. Those bad guys at the board made us. You can do the bad cop, good cop thing by giving clear instructions. But you need to look up wherever you are precisely what are the administrative structure of your accreditor. Above all, the regional accreditor, which is in charge of general accrediting, but all of the different ones if you can. And make sure that you exercise the maximum amount of power and never let anybody simply say, oh, we were forced to do this.
Thanks, David. Really appreciate that. So I'm going to turn now to some questions we have submitted from the audience. And as a reminder, you can submit those to anna.low@aei.org or with the hashtag on X, hashtag college trustees AEI. First question from the audience. State universities, particularly flagships, consistently poll well and are well liked in their respective states. UNC, for instance, is very popular in North Carolina. Based on this fact, is it fair for governors and trustees to act as if their own universities are in crisis? I'll open that up for anyone who wants to take a stab at that one.
I will say yes. Let us know, because people are in favor of universities frequently remembering what it was like 20 years ago. They don't necessarily know how badly it's changed in detail, and they would often be shocked. And they are shocked when they are informed of the details of how much it's changed. And in effect, you should say, we are in favor of A, B, C, and D, and they will say, aren't the universities doing that already? And you have to say, no. So yes, you can boldly and in detail go in favor of major reform, because it will simply be restoring the universities to what many citizens think is how they are operating. And if they're told that they're not, then they will say, yes, well, of course, that's what we want. It's the way we thought it should be.
Yeah, I would just second what David said. That's exactly right. Jay Green talks about this frequently in our discussions, that what we're up against is misty-eyed nostalgia. And I think that's exactly right. We have this affinity for our alma maters, and we think that they are exactly how they were 20 or 30 years ago, and a lot has changed. And, it's probably not dissimilar to how people think about Congress, right? That as a general matter, we tend to like our members, but have quite a lot of disdain for Congress generally. So the same is likely to hold true for colleges and universities as well.
Awesome, thank you. So I'll go to our next audience questions. How should trustees handle a tenure case that has been put forward by the faculty, but which a trustee believes should be denied?
Well, sorry, David, were you gonna?
No, go.
I'll just say really quickly, one of the first things that needs to happen is to actually look at who's up for tenure. And this is something that is too often hidden, maybe unintentionally, but it's often the case that at least once a year, you will get a slew of people who are up for tenure. If you're at a large university, that could be 70 or so people. And so to go through and to actually read their bios and to know a bit about their research, that does take time. That's something that isn't always made, I use the term publicly available, but available to the board in a way that's easy to navigate. And so, often if you'll talk to administration, they'll say, well, it would require uploading a whole lot of documents about each of these, the work of each of these candidates for tenure. Well, maybe that just means a simple hyperlink to their CV so that members of the board can actually give a look and just see what these prospective folks who are up for tenure have been researching. And so just doing your due diligence, but there is certainly a role to play, an oversight role to play when these tenure decisions come up. So I think just getting the information in the first place is often a hurdle, but it's one that can be overcome.
I think it's also important, you can ask for more time. I mean, I feel like we have a lot of artificial, like, oh, this decision has to be by, like, no, I mean, I recently had a motion to approve a document table because I said, like, I will not vote on this. And everybody was horrified. And rather, like, they kind of wanted to save face. And they're like, we'll table this until, right, like, let's have more time. And you are always within your right to demand more time. You are giving someone lifetime employment. That should not be doled out lightly. And when you see what some of these, right, I mean, you think about the original intent of tenure to sort of challenge the status quo, and then you look at becoming this wacko, irrelevant echo chamber. I mean, are you kidding me right now? Like, no one is entitled to lifetime employment for stuff like that. And so even, I mean, tenure is not like, it's not huge amounts of money that at least like my university is paying these people, but it doesn't matter. I mean, and then when you start to dig into the faculty handbook and you look at the terms of when can a tenured faculty member be let go, it's outrageous. I mean, and so these are things I think that should not be doled out lightly. And for them to try and pressure you is a completely artificial construct.
I want to add that the appointment power of boards of trustees for university presidents is incredibly important and ought to be exercised more strongly. This is really the job of the university president and, provosts whom he appoints. Boards of trustees have to do this when the university president is AWOL, but they ought to be appointing strong mission-aligned education reformers to the, to be the heads of the administration, the public universities, to do their jobs properly. The boards of trustees absolutely should have this power to, check for faculty tenuring, but the university presidents and the provosts ought to be doing the jobs as well.
Thanks, everyone. Got another question here from the audience. So in some states like Florida, the Senate must approve the governor's picks for board members of colleges and universities. We have a GOP-led Senate in Florida that is denying confirmation for Governor DeSantis' choices for our university's board of trustees, and they are threatening to pass legislation that will severely curtail his ability to appoint the best people for the job according to his judgment in the future. What can be done to help put pressure on legislatures to accept effective choices for universities? Anyone want to jump in on that?
I mean, it kind of makes me feel a little bit better that it's not just Virginia doing this. I don't know. But it is, right? I mean, I think we're watching this play out at the federal level as well, right? Like, to what extent is a chief executive able to determine the people that will serve and execute, right? I mean, this is why we're probably going to get Humphrey's executor overturned, to like sort of spin into con law nerd for a sec. And yeah, it is questionable. And also, I mean, you look at in a purple state like Virginia, where we have gone back and forth in administrations. I mean, these boards have been turning over, right? Like when I came on, it was mostly a Democrat board. And then now most of them are Youngkin appointees in the Virginia boards of varying levels of kind of aggressiveness engagement. But I do think that I don't know, I personally believe in like a strong executive, and I think that they should be able to appoint people who they see fit for these institutions. Certainly not every governor around the country has taken this responsibility seriously, and many of them do still put their governor, their golf buddies and their donors on these boards. But we have seen a couple, I think led by DeSantis and then followed on by Kim Reynolds and other people like that, now Greg Abbott, that are starting to actually put more bold trustees into these positions.
Yeah, and if the legislature is preventing some reform-minded appointees from being appointed to these boards, then the governors just need to stick to their guns and keep on appointing people until they ultimately get into place. I mean, we've seen it, to Nikki's point, in Virginia, where change in the legislature there meant it became very difficult for the governor to get new appointees to the boards confirmed, to the extent that as Nikki mentioned earlier, they're effectively kicking people off of boards in Virginia by not confirming them. And so just kind of sticking to your guns and continue to appoint maybe even more reform-oriented people, to put it lightly, while they have the opportunity. So, it's tough, but I think we're seeing this because those who are anti-reform, those on the left who want to maintain the monoculture of higher education, understand correctly how important these roles are, these boards of trustees and visitors roles are, and that there is a real opportunity to effectively shape the strategic direction of higher education for the long term. And, this is something that, to go back to what we got to at the top, that I think reform-minded governors are really understanding is a power and an opportunity that they have to shape higher education for the long run. And so the left is going to continue to put up roadblocks, and those who are wanting to reform higher ed through boards should just continue to advance board members who are going to be reform oriented and righteous in upholding their mission.
I want to shift the focus a little bit. This is the classic thing, of course. I think it's very important to have a long-term strategy promoting the careers of reform-minded trustees. And by that, I mean focus a lot on getting trustees into the less well-known, smaller public university branches, their campuses, get people to get the experience there so that when they come up for the flagships, you can promote them and it'll be a sort of a slam dunk just based upon their qualifications to everybody, a governor, a legislative majority, this person really should be there. And so focus on getting people with education reformers first onto the community colleges, then onto whatever senior campus, and then use the people who've already now had 5 to 10 years experience, then have them go onto the flagships, and by golly, everyone will say, yes, they ought to be there.
To be fair, when I was put on my board, I was told I could not pick one of the big four. I'm not as smart as Lindsay, so I got a smaller college. But it's fun because, I think what is really the challenge that's facing a lot of the smaller universities right now is, there is this demographic problem, right? There is the birth dearth. There is also, we're watching the consolidation of some of these small ones. And the first question I asked my president when I started was, what's our comparative advantage? Why should somebody come here, right? And we have seen Sweetbriar and Hampshire and all these different schools look at closing. And so, as we want 1,000 flowers to bloom, how will they specialize? Will you be an honors college? Will you be a STEM school? Will you be a pursuit of truth university? Will you be a weird woke university? And there can be all of these things. It's that like when you have UVA that's trying to be all things to all people is when there are really bad problems. And so I think it's a great point is that there's a lot of opportunity, particularly at these smaller schools, to carve a new unique path.
I would totally agree. In my chapter, a little bit where I talk about how trustees can improve ROI at universities, one of the things I talk about is that not every university has to offer every major out there. West Virginia University was a great example of what happened here, where they had something like 20 majors that had just a few students in each in each one. I mean, they had a Russian literature major with several tenured faculty that had maybe like 10 students across 4 years or something like that. And so the president eventually said, in order to solve this kind of financial situation we find ourselves in, we actually do have to shut down some of these programs. And that's never an easy decision. But sometimes if the university does say, okay, we want to slim down the programs a little bit, we want to specialize a little bit more, they can emerge stronger in the long run. So, I really take this point that you're making about, how can we think about what is our comparative advantage? What is the way that we can offer the most value to the Commonwealth, to the state, to students? And that doesn't mean being all things to all people all the time. Sometimes that means finding what we're really good at and trying to invest in that rather than doing everything under the sun. David, I want to go back to you. We have a question from the audience that is specifically directed at you, but I want to invite anyone else to jump in on it if they would like to. One idea that you propose in your chapter is about implementing an exit exam for all students. Do you know of any institution where this practice has been implemented successfully?
No. So we put that, I put that in because it's a wonderful idea, but no, there isn't even as yet a best existing practice. I will say, practically speaking, I thought of that as being something you would have in combination with a core curricula or a very tightly defined set of distribution requirements. You obviously can't have an exit exam on every subject under the sun. It's got to be on some core bits of knowledge that you have gained during your 4 years. So, the Western humanities, American history, American government, I would focus calculus. I will tip my hat to the math sciences there, but the point being, come up with something tightly related to the a core curriculum or some equivalently core definition of knowledge come up with a reasonable definition for what students ought to have known coming in, come up with something somewhat more difficult for what they should have coming out, since frankly, most students seem to come out of college having gained zero or negative knowledge. It's rather depressing. But this needs to be done first in one institution. So it's something which needs to be done first somewhere. So I know I cannot as yet point to a place where it's already been done, darn it.
I really, one reason I am very interested in this idea is that, to go back to what we said earlier, universities are just a mess of competing interest groups. They all want kind of their one thing, and that kind of often results in a very incoherent policy at universities, because every interest group is trying to get their one thing to happen. And in the absence of goals that the university can kind of use to focus itself on achieving some outcome, you're often not going to see the change that you desire. And so one reason I am very intrigued by this exit exam idea is like, well, that's a way to kind of focus the university on making sure it is helping students learn this core knowledge. If students are not doing very well in the exit exam, maybe that's a sign that they need to do something different with the curriculum. But of course, if you're not measuring that at all, then you're never going to understand that students are not necessarily learning. In my chapter a little bit, I talk about at Purdue, something a little bit different. Mitch Daniels had his tuition freeze for 10 years. He froze tuition in nominal terms, which meant tuition went down in real terms. And, the reason that this was so successful is because he did set this goal, that we do want to freeze tuition at this level, and we're just going to have to solve for that. We're going to have to focus the rest of the institution around finding cost efficiencies in order to make sure tuition can stay at this level. There's no one silver bullet to bring costs down. It's the kind of thing like, well, instead of mowing the lawn every 2 weeks, we mow the lawn every 3 weeks instead. But you don't make those decisions unless you kind of have a goal to focus them around. Yeah, that's just kind of my random thought on this exit exam idea, but feel free to push back.
May I have one follow-up?
Of course, yeah.
I think it would be the most cost effective if you were to institute it in one or more large state university systems, because then the cost is amortized over, tens of thousands of students. I would encourage, for example, Florida, Texas, and North Carolina to come up with a group to have one common exit exam system for 3 big states, and you could expand from there. I think that would be the most practical way to get an exit exam system up and running.
Awesome, thank you. So I have a question that I kind of want to put to the group right now. So the second Trump administration has probably been the most active on higher education in my lifetime, at least in its first 100 days or so. And obviously some people really criticize them over this, and some people really love what they're doing. Some trustees might say, we actually really like the direction that the Trump administration is going, and we like that they are putting pressure on our institutions to make some of these changes that we think are necessary. And some others might say, well, even if we agree on the aims, they might be overstepping their authority. So I want to kind of put it to the group. How do you see the role of trustees interacting with this all these new policies that are coming out of the Trump administration to kind of influence what's going on campus and try to reform education using federal levers of power? I'll just open that up to the group, anyone who wants to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think boards of trustees would have and should have gone after DEI that was illegal anyways. However, what the Trump administration's done on that, I think, has been pitch perfect and has really given board members and even beyond boards, university presidents, if they know what's good, air cover to basically say, look, there is a federal requirement. There's an executive order that says we could jeopardize, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars, or if you're Harvard, maybe $9 billion over the long run, if we don't address illegal DEI, et cetera, on our campuses. And so I think that has been really helpful. Again, I think it's something that boards of trustees should have done anyways, but now there is, the federal sort of push at their backs to make sure that they actually get it done.
Yeah, I think, board members who are sort of mission aligned with what the Trump administration is trying to do, I think often probably sometimes have better insights into what the administration wants than some of the bureaucrats. Because I think, I look at how university administrators and leaders, they're dealing with the barbarians are inside the gate, right? You have your faculty senate and you have the AAUP and all of these entities inside, the facility that is arguing for, resist, stay strong. There are the outside organizations. I just, last week the AAUP had its day of action on all these issues. They had webinars on how to out your Trump-aligned trustee members. They're trying to intimidate everybody everywhere to maintain the status quo. And so I do, as Lindsay said, I think it's really incumbent on trustees to serve as, the moral backbone in this. This is where we should be. And then also, yeah, I think as David had said, give air cover as well. We will be the bad guys. Be like, I'm there for 4 years as an appointed position. I believe in the rule of law. I believe that discrimination is bad. If you want to dox me for that, so be it. Everybody else has to live with the consequences of that. But I do think that it is important for us to serve as kind of the moral North Star on these issues, particularly because there are so many other forces that are trying to undermine it along the way.
I want to add the good cop compliment to that. I think that there are administrations which have become so ideologically rigid and captured that they're going to try to defy the Trump administration at immense, legal cost, and indeed, cost of, millions or billions of dollars of, research funds, when it's indefensible. And I think they need somebody in the room to tell them, get off that ledge. You're defending the indefensible morally and legally. You're going to waste taxpayer money. Please be sensible and compromise. And I think they need to hear that too. So I guess I'm going to say there should be some moral North Stars, and there also should be some friendly people putting an arm around the shoulder saying, step back, step down. And both are needed, I think. And boards can fulfill both functions.
That's a great perspective from everybody. So we've just got a couple minutes left. I just want to, give everybody 30 seconds to a minute for some quick closing thoughts on the role of trustees. And if there's one thing that you want a trustee at a public or private university who wants to make change but isn't quite sure how to go about doing it to take away from this conversation, what would that one thing be? Lindsay, why don't I start with you and we'll go down the line.
Yeah, so I would just say that the time goes quick. It's, what's the old adage when you have children, the days are long and the years are short. It kind of feels like that with board governance too, that it feels like a long time in the moment, but it's actually really short. And just when you feel like you've gotten your sea legs and you know what your role and responsibility is, all of a sudden your 4 years are up. And so as quickly as you can get acquainted with other like-minded allies, board members who can help you navigate what you are able to do as a board member, do that. And don't be afraid to just delve in right away to be the Nikki on the board and actually make your opinions and voices heard. You were put there for a reason. It's not just because you're able to put your name on a building or have deep pockets. For the governors who truly are reform oriented, you were put there because of your policy expertise or philosophical perspective. And so to take a phrase from the left, lean into it, right? Lean into that and actually use your time wisely and get to work right away.
Nikki, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of that show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Use the phone a friend option. I have found it so helpful to find a tribe of other trustees, some who I met during my board orientation through Virginia, who are different universities. But it has been really fascinating to me to find out that the different institutions don't always pass on things from the state that they should be passing on. And so just little things like that, how are you dealing with this? Do you have a question about this? We have a board meeting coming up. I want to ask about blank. When we had changed a speech policy that I had sued under over speech first, I actually had recommended that fire come in, and then fire were the ones who were sort of my surrogate messenger. And somebody else at a different school was like, that's great, we'd like them to come in too. And so I think sort of there's a good hive mind in that people have different tactics that can be employed. But you're not in this alone. There are, certainly reach out to Lindsay or myself, or, we have anyone of, other people who are more mild-mannered if that's your flavor, because we do want to help, and we want to, share this information to help you govern better.
David, give us the last word.
My last word is that I want Heritage and AEI to follow up with this, to develop professional development focused on, say, a list of 10 top things that board members should do, and to make that be something which can be a priority, which will then help board members around the country to figure out how to work on just a top 10 list of issues. So that's my challenge to you, because I think you could do a great job. So you're certainly building upon what you've done in this pamphlet. And by the way, and all my colleagues, wonderful stuff was reading theirs. Um, for my own remit, which is standards, I'm going to say I think the general education requirements are the things which it's easiest to address and will get you the largest bang for the buck in terms of what can you do focused to improve standards. So general education requirement reform, above all to get a core curriculum, I think is the one single practical thing that you can do with the most chances of success and improvement. I'll stop there.
Thanks very much, everybody. I want to give a big thank you to all of our panelists for sharing an hour of their time with us this afternoon. I certainly learned a lot from the group here. I also want to just give a big thank you to the whole team here at the American Enterprise Institute and the Heritage Foundation for making this event possible, particularly Anna Lowe and Annika Hernandez, who did all of kind of the back end work on making this event happen. It would not have happened without them, so very grateful. The edited volume, Fulfilling the Trust, is available on aei.org if you'd like to read all these chapters for yourselves. That's it from me. I will end it there, and we look forward to seeing you all at the next AEI event.